there's a couple of things I think I learned from The Wait Out. Some important life lessons. One, don't trust Elaine while driving. That's for sure. Two, I guess sometimes waiting out a marriage can be worth it. And three, don't wear a pair of tight jeans. Don't. Absolutely don't. But The Wait Out I thought was actually a pretty underrated episode and pretty funny. From the fact that Elaine apparently is a terrible driver, as she was borrowing a friend's car for a week while she was out of town, to the whole, I'm here for you thing. And then Kramer, of course, being Kramer with blue jeans. And also, it was a return of Mickey Abbott. It's been a while since we've seen our good pal Mickey. But what was he doing here? Let's talk about the Wait Out episode. So first, the episode starts off with Jerry and Elaine at Monk's. Jerry comes in and he says someone had, I think, triple parked or something like that and blocked some spaces in or something like that. Elaine says, "Oh, that's my car." She mentions how she was borrowing her one friend's car who was out of town. And of course, throughout the episode, we see scenes with Jerry in the car with her, and we basically find out that, Elaine is a terrible driver. Because I think up till now, when's the last time we really seen Elaine drive? Well, we did hear about her maniac experience back in the Busboy episode. She was trying to drive that one guy who was getting on a plane to fly back to Seattle that she just couldn't stand after 2 days. But, Elaine is a maniac driver. We don't really see her drive too much in the series. I don't realize that. But to get that story out of the way with, that's good there. But anyways, while they were there, they see this couple, David and Beth Luker. Elaine mentions how she heard that their marriage has been a little rocky. Jerry admits he's always had a little bit of a thing for Beth. And then Elaine's like, I'm gonna be honest, I've always had a little bit of a thing for David. So then they came over to say hello. And then they introduced, they introduced George to them, or they said hi to George. I can't remember which way around it was. But they find out, I think Beth was once Don Mattingly's doctor, and Dave is a salesman. Well, then George makes a joke and says, "Well, David, I think you could have done a lot," or I think he tells Beth that you could have done a lot better, and it's as a joke. But of course, David and Beth awkwardly look at each other. To find out later that sure enough, David and Beth separated and they were getting divorced. So Jerry and Elaine, who each have a thing, Jerry has a thing for Beth, Elaine has a thing for David. So they decide they would each reach out to the other. And just basically be their shoulder to cry on and say, "I'm here for you." And then eventually they want "I'm here for you" to turn into "I'm here." So that little experiment, that interesting twist of you got two people who, obviously each have, one has a crush on the wife, one has a crush on the husband. And obviously now that, they're separated, they're like, "Well, I'm here," which was kind of me. Well, not completely, but kind of me back in high school when I had this crush on this one girl for like 6 months. I waited out 2 relationships, and the second one, the girl finally looked at me a little bit more than just a friend, but then it only lasted about a week and a half, and then I just realized after that okay, yeah, she was basically someone who thought that she could just look at me and flirt with me until someone else came along, which was not cool at all. But similar situation to me somewhat, except there wasn't anybody I know going after the guy. Well, the guy actually, an hour after he broke up with her, started dating this other girl that only lasted maybe a week. So yeah, not the best first relationship for me. Even though my fiance will always say it didn't count because it was only 3 days. It's like, it still counted. I asked her out. Anyways, so Elaine and David go out. Jerry and Beth go out. And they both soon then come to realize that it was George's comment that led them to separate. George, of course, finds that out, and he feels bad and wants to apologize. Says, when does George want to apologize for something like that? I never remember George wanting to apologize. I feel bad for breaking up a couple. So then he goes and tries talking to Beth, which of course Jerry calls while he's there, and as he's trying to talk George out of it, George pretends that Jerry's talking about something else and hangs up on him, which of course infuriates Jerry, and of course he gets to David also and apologizes to him. Also at the same time though, David was with Elaine, and they were talking to and George was out on a date with Susan, and it was noticed awkward sitting there, don't have anything to really talk about at all. And again, George just continues to find some way to try to get out of this. David makes the same comment to Susan about how George could have done better, in which then Susan says, "You go on, I needed some time to think." And then, of course, Jerry, who wants to kill George, which earlier in the episode, whenever George said he was going to go apologize, Elaine and Jerry wouldn't let him get through. And, all right, don't make me get physical here. And it leads to, like, a 2-on-1 fight with Jerry and Elaine beating up George. Well, there was a blooper reel where... in that scene where Julia Louis-Dreyfus grabbed George by the collar, slammed him against the door, and then tossed him behind the couch. And you just see her just like peering up, like throwing the punches down. It was hilarious. Probably another very hysterical blooper for sure. But of course, she really just nailed him with it. Of course, but and then George still shows up looking all beaten up and talking to Beth, and who says that, like, it's funny, George, not someone realized something until someone like you comes along or something like that. But then, of course, eventually, Beth starts, having some second thoughts and thinking that she made a huge mistake. So while Elaine and David were on a date at David's apartment, Beth shows up and they make up and they make out. So unfortunately, George saves the marriage, but of course ruins Jerry and Elaine's chances at getting their crushes. Fortunately for Jerry, though, this isn't the last time we see Beth. She appears in a later episode as actually another one of my personal favorites, but we'll talk about that later on down the line. Meanwhile, of course, I'll save the part with George and Susan for last, because last we hear about Susan, Susan seemed to be thinking about things, but George is all excited thinking that, oh my gosh, Susan's having second thoughts. He's trying to find another reason for her to break up with him and get out of this relationship. So, anyways, though, Kramer's story, though. Kramer's kind of a little more off to himself. Kramer, I guess, Mickey came back. He had some audition, and Kramer was going to be part of his audition. But, of course, I guess Kramer's complaining about the pants he had to wear, and then Jerry said something like, why don't you go back to jeans? Which Kramer's like, no, I'm not doing that. Eventually, he gives jeans a try, though, and he can't get the blue jeans off. They were just so tight and trapped him. There's a lot of, like, good, like, physical comedy scenes, like in Jerry's apartment, wherever Jerry's trying to, pull the jeans off of him. He's, like, flapping like a fish on the couch, which I believe Michael Richards actually did hurt his back while Jerry was trying to free him from his jeans in the car. On the table, which was hysterical. And of course, because the jeans were so tight, he couldn't sit down. Kramer could not sit down. Like, even when they did the audition thing, and he was supposed to sit down, but he wouldn't sit down, and Mickey was getting aggravated, and he actually like said, I said sit down, but everybody thought it was for real, and I think it ended up working out for Mickey in the long run. Well, then, Kramer was asked by one of their neighbors if she could watch her kid for like an hour because I guess her babysitter was running late. So Kramer says he'll do it. But the kid, whose name was Joey, who actually appears in another future episode also, was trying to fall asleep, sees Kramer's shadow because of how Kramer's walking because of the tight blue jeans that he can't get off. Joey thinks it's Frankenstein, a monster. So Joey gets up and runs out of the room. So then Kramer was worried that, either the babysitter or the mother would show up and realize that Joey was gone. So Kramer calls Mickey, interrupts a date, and has him come over and basically just lays in the bed with a cover over his head, posing posing as the child. Of course, the mother came back and kissed Mickey's head goodnight. I don't know it was Mickey until Mickey goes goodnight, and then we see Jerry and Elaine sit in the apartment lamenting again over how they lost out on Beth and David, and all of a sudden you hear like a big scream, and then Jerry's like, that's to Kramer, basically. Which I love those moments where it's that, and then back in the Friars Club episode, whenever Jerry sees them taking a body out of Kramer's apartment, I know it's Kramer, because that's when Kramer fell asleep on top of his mafia princess girlfriend, but they threw him into the East River. They thought he was dead, but I still think it's hilarious, and he's like, I don't know what the heck is going on. I don't know what that guy's up to as always, or something like that. Just one of those things where it's like, there's more to the story, but Jerry's like, well, it's a Kramer thing. But then, of course, Kramer went to, was like chasing Joey down the street, but then Joey's like freaking out. He's like, it's the monster! And then Kramer's like, I'm the babysitter! So he gets arrested, and of course the cops wouldn't believe him he was the babysitter. They keep telling him to sit down, but again, Kramer couldn't sit down because of those stinking blue jeans. Oh, man. And then, of course, that was actually the last scene, but the last scene before the credits was George was excited, waiting for Susan to show up to thinking that they were going to break up. But then she showed up just to tell George, I've been doing some deep thinking, and George was like, yeah, I know. Like, pretend he's getting all upset, preparing for it to come, and she goes, I decided to go with the chicken. And then she just walks away, and George's like, yeah, I know. Like, wait, what? And that was it. He had no way out yet again. George was stuck. But of course, next up is the season 7 finale. The Invitations. Which the $1 million question comes around, especially after watching Inside Looks. How will this story end? Will George go through with the wedding? Will he break it off with Susan? Will Susan break it off with him? After everything George has tried to get out of this. Wedding being delayed. Postponing it from Christmas till spring. Then Leonard's, the place, the hall they're going to have it at, getting double booked and postponing it till June. What's next? What's the last straw? What's the final chapter in this story of George's engagement and the season 7 story arc with the pact that took place beforehand? And of course, if George does go through this wedding, how will that affect all the other three lives? Find out next in the season 7 finale, which again is also Larry David's last episode until the actual series finale in season 9, which is the last episode of Larry David was executive producer for Seinfeld. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. But we'll have a very interesting episode in the next video to talk about the season 7 finale, The Invitations. And also, quite possibly, one of the coldest, well, two I'd say, of the coldest moments. Cold, rude humor. Rude but hilarious cold humor moment in Seinfeld. And in all of television history. What will that be? We'll find out next. Because one of them is definitely, quite possibly, the best George scene. Or the best George moment I can think of. But we'll talk about that all next. So guys, what were your thoughts on the wait out? Have you ever waited out a marriage before? Did it work out and go through? Who knows? And also, do not trust the lane while driving, as we learned at the beginning of this when I talked about that. And also, of course, don't wear tight blue jeans. They'll never come off. And, I don't know what else. But that does it, guys, for the wait out. Again, leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. And be sure as always to slap a like on the video and subscribe for more content on my channel. And follow me on Twitter as well, at DemandAirboy93. Until then, guys, I'm checking out. I'll see you guys in the season 7 finale, The Invitations, as we go through the final chapter of this season-long storyline arc. Have a great rest of your night, guys. I'll catch you soon. Peace out, everybody.